Okay, I will call the meeting to order at 4:02 p.m. Thank you all for being here. And I am going to ask, is there anybody who's willing, any of the members who are willing to do minutes? They just basically have to be the motions. Any volunteers? Okay, I will do it, but it's really hard to lead a meeting and do minutes. So, um,
I'll do the minutes.
oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So, first thing on our agenda is additional member introductions. Last week we introduced ourselves to the meeting. I invited Bill Watts and Richard Welsh to join us today. They're members of the public, but Rich was on the previous committee, and Bill indicated an interest in joining the committee, and we may want to have alternate members just to take the pressure off of having trying to find 5 people to meet. So I did reach out, and I also reached out to Jonathan Moore, who had indicated an interest. So just so you guys know why and Rich is also, he's the person I talked to you guys about last week, who has a really cool idea of how to capture the speed test information. And I asked him if he could explain that to all of us. But so if Ken and Eric want to introduce themselves and why you guys wanted to join this group, that would be awesome to share with everybody.
Yeah, my name is Eric Roper. Live here in Kent, and I volunteered immediately when the last committee was announced under the prior leadership, and I had done some reading, and I was very interested in the idea. But I think Ken and I and maybe a few others went to one meeting, and then it just nothing more happened. So I was very excited to be able to have the opportunity to, I guess, rejoin is the right word. The new up and the new re-uppance. So this is great.
Well, thanks for being here. Ken.
Yeah, I'm Ken Cooper. I think I know all of you around here. I was on the last committee with Eric and Richard and was very disappointed that it disbanded so quickly. I think this is an issue that has a profound effect on the future of our community, and it's a complicated issue to deal with, uh, and it impacts the business world, and impacts our property values, and impacts everything, all the things, our ability to engage with the rest of the world and attract people to our community. So I think this is one of the most important things um, that we could be focused on right now.
Thank you. And Steve Penner.
Hello, I'm Steve Penner, and I was asked to be on this committee to give a little bit of perspective from the world of real estate, where I've seen the issue of broadband accessibility impacting, as Ken said, property values, and also just kind of the general shift we're seeing in terms of people moving to the area and needing to be able to connect to the outside world to live and work from this area. So happy to join, happy to help out. I'm sorry I missed the first meeting.
No problem. We're glad you're here. Okay. So we have public comment on the agenda. If any of you members of the public would like to say anything, Rich or Bill, you're welcome to say something. Okay, I'm going to move on then and introduce Jill Drew, who is one of the co-chairs of the Sharon Internet Connect Task Force. Thank you for being here.
Oh, happy to be here. Good to see you all. I think I addressed the first meeting of the previous group, and maybe that's why everybody quit afterwards. So I hope it doesn't have the same effect on this one. I'm glad this is the second meeting.
Well, Jill, there was a desire for you to share some of your experiences in Sharon and any words of wisdom and advice that you could give to us. Would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I'll just give you guys a little overview of what we're doing and how we got here, and then happy to take any questions. So I actually got involved in this in 2019, November of 2019, when our previous, there was an organization that I'm not sure is still in formation called Northwest Connect. And that was a group of people from various towns in the Northwest corner that I think got started by Roberta Willis when she was leaving the legislature, knowing that broadband access was a big issue in throughout her district. And she sort of teamed up with a guy named from Norfolk, whose name is now, I'm so sorry, escaping me. One of you will know this. It'll come back to me. But anyway, they sort of teamed up and created a regional group. And they actually raised a fair amount of money. And they did a lot of marketing about how important it would be to have high-speed internet accessibility for everyone, universal access to high-speed internet. And they were really wanted to create a regional all-fiber network with all of the towns in the Northwest Hills COG. And their marketing was terrific and the idea was wonderful, but the issue was that every single town, there is no budget for the Northwest COG to actually implement something like that. We don't have county government. So each town would have to allocate money for this project. And it didn't seem like any towns were having any traction to try to figure out, okay, what would this actually cost? So in 2019, a group was formed, and myself and Megan Flanagan, who may come on this call, became the co-chairs of it. And we were really just trying to figure out, came in with an open mind, how this could possibly be done. But how could we get universal access in the town of Sharon? And would it be fiber? Could the town do it as a town-owned network? Could our town contribute to a region-wide fiber network? Would we want to work with the current incumbent? For us is Comcast, cable, would that be sufficient? And so did we want to also tackle poor cell service everywhere? And so one of the first decisions we made is we're going to take cell service and we're going to put it off to the side, because just figuring out how to do universal access to high-speed internet was a huge task. For 7 years, the town had tried to get Comcast to wire certain roads in town that they had never wired because it wasn't cost effective for them to do it. There weren't enough houses, or if there were enough houses, the houses were so far from the road that the cost of doing the wiring they were not going to get the return on investment that they needed to get to make that investment. So we started looking at what were the options for a town-owned fiber network that we would contract out someone to do. And what we did was we did an RFP that said what we want is universal access to it didn't have to be all fiber, but high-speed internet. And we got 5 proposals. This was back, I think I think our initial RFP is on our website. I think it was back in late 2020, maybe early 2021. And we whittled it down to one firm called Certex, which is based in Plainfield, Connecticut. And they had done a fair amount of the build out in Western Massachusetts of town-owned fiber networks. The difference between Connecticut and Western Massachusetts was the state of Massachusetts had allocated a lot of money for something called the Wired West of Massachusetts. So what these companies did was they were able to create projects, engineer projects, and apply for state money to implement them in towns in the lower Berkshires in Massachusetts. So anyway, Certex did a fabulous plan. They engineered it all. They came up with a cost. It was going to be $12.5 million in Sharon for capital expenses. And then to run the system, we needed to have something, I'm not going to remember the exact number, but it was something like, I don't know, 250, 300,000 of revenue a year. Anyway, I remember the take rate needed to be like the percentage of houses in Sharon that needed to subscribe. And I think we had it set at $70 a month for 1 gig symmetrical. We needed to have a take rate of something like 35, 40% to break even. And don't hold me to those numbers, but if you care about them, you can find them on the website. But it was something like that. So we said, okay, world, we had a big meeting in the town. We said, I think it had to be Zoom because by now we were in the COVID. We said, this is how much it would cost in capital expense. This is how we would do the bonding. But in order to move forward, we need to find out how many of you are going to subscribe, because we can't do this and not have the town be able to pay the annual costs of it out of, it wouldn't be able to pay that out of our budget. And I think we got 41 people and we needed like 200. Wow. And so we were kind of stuck. And so our next step was to do a bigger marketing, do more to try to get people excited about this. And at that point, Comcast contacted us and said, you know what? We're interested. Let us help you. Let us build out the roads that we've never built out. And that'll be a lot less expensive for you because there are a lot fewer roads. And you can see the roads that are part of our project on our website. I can't remember how many there are, but something like 20. And through a lot of back and forth, we negotiated and came up with a deal that was $1.6 million. And there was no annual fee that we would have to come up with every year because they would own and maintain the network. Now that's both good and bad. The maintenance that they maintain the network is great, right? But the fact that they own it means they can charge anybody whatever they want. And as you know, there is no state regulation of telecommunications rates. So there were some people in Sharon who were very much against this, and I totally understand it because the town would be paying a multi-billion-dollar corporation 1.6 million of our hard-earned tax dollars to basically build out a system that they would own and control, and we couldn't tell them how to manage anything. But the only other option that we saw was the option that we only had 41 people take, which is a town-owned all-fiber network. So we put it to a town, but we had a lot of town meetings, and then this was at the end of 2022, and we'd had our first informational meeting and we were moving to a town meeting for a vote on the project, and Frontier raised its hand and said, we'll give you an all fiber network and we'll do all of Sharon. We have to replace all of our copper wire. We're going to do all of Sharon. We'll do it at the same timeline Comcast is promising, and would only be 3.1 million. So we had a big town meeting about that, and we ended up having basically two choices that we as our committee tried to give all the information and do all the legwork about these two different choices. And we put it to the town, and the town voted to go with Comcast, the $1.6 million deal. And we signed the contract after, it takes some time. I think the town voted on this in like November of 2022, and we didn't get the contract signed until, I want to say, February of 2023. And so therefore we went with Comcast. So that was a long history. All I'm saying about that now is one of the things you ought to do, I think you should do first, is reach out to your incumbent provider, which I believe is Optimum, to find out if they, or whoever is your
Spectrum.
provider.
Spectrum.
Okay. Spectrum. Then do they have any interest in building out the parts of town that aren't built out? They are really the only ones who know what parts of town aren't built out. We had to do a lot of research before Comcast came on board, to literally drive down all our roads and look and see where there were cable lines. And I don't know how much of Kent's utilities are underground. There's some places in Sharon where they're underground. So we just had a real kind of guesstimate almost of, what was served and what wasn't served. So, anyway, if you wanted to overbuild your whole town, you wouldn't need to do that. But I think the federal dollars that are now going to be available, I don't think they would pay for you to overbuild all of Kent, because part of Kent has high-speed internet with Spectrum. But they would pay for you to go to the last mile for every single house that doesn't currently have access to, meaning there's no wire running down their road.
Mm-hmm.
So we went ahead and our little group, the town, hired a part-time contract performance manager to be sort of the day-to-day person in charge of the Comcast project for the town and helping people in the town communicate with Comcast and all of that. And then Megan and I, as the co-chairs, kind of have stayed very in close touch with this project. And we're almost done with construction. I mean, we have a few final, very difficult places where the construction hasn't happened yet. And they're very much into installing now. So we have a lot of installations going on. I don't know what the final take rate is going to be. And I understand from Comcast that that's proprietary information and they will never really tell us. But we have a pretty good, we're trying to follow up with every single resident who we know is part of the project to see if they are signing up, or if they're not, why are they not? And if they have signed up, are they happy with their project, with the speed that they got and the prices that they're paying and all of that. So, once the project started, it was really like just managing a project like any big complicated project. And the hard part is getting to figuring out where you need to build and where you're going to get the money for it. And as Lynn knows, because she's been on a lot of these calls with me, there are two pots of money that are now available through the federal government. One is something that is, and they're both being administered by the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, Connecticut DEEP. One of them is called the Connected Communities Grant, and that's $48 million that the application process is just about to open. And that is one of the things that you have to do actually for both of these is you have to look at the maps that have been drawn by and put together by the Federal Communications Commission to see what homes they consider to be unserved or underserved. Unserved means their internet is below 25 download, 3 upload. And underserved is, I think, below 100 download and maybe also 25 upload. I may have those wrong, but anyway, there's an unserved category and there's an underserved category. That project will pay for those homes to get service. The broadband equity the BEAD program, Broadband Equity Access Deployment Funds, is a much bigger pot of money. Can't remember how much now, but it is a bigger pot. And it has some more restrictions on it, but it also essentially pays for the same thing. The goal of the state is to have universal access to broadband, and the minimum speed I think that they want is 100 download and 100 upload. So the task for your group right now, I think the first big task is to look at the maps, find someone who's willing to spend the time looking at the maps that the state maintains and that the federal government's maintaining, and to look at addresses that maybe you know that road doesn't have anything but, you know, Frontier copper lines. Like, you can assume any road that only has Frontier copper lines is unserved. You know, people do not have access to high-speed internet. That does not qualify as high-speed internet. So if you know what roads those are, then looking on those maps to make sure that that map is accurately reflecting that those people do not have access is an important first step, because to get any of the federal dollars, you have to prove that you're serving unserved or underserved people. And one of the things that I am still working with DEEP on, or I'm not working with them, I'm asking them, is that on the federal maps, they consider satellite, like Starlink. It says that those roads are served, but it's my understanding that it's supposed to be a wired connection, not a satellite connection. Satellite from like HughesNet is generally not fast enough to qualify for high-speed internet, or not reliable enough, or the latency is too big, so too high for it to qualify. But those maps are really problematic because they over, what's the word I'm looking for? They say that a lot more houses are served than are really served. So there has to be a whole challenge process to those maps that I haven't even begun yet, but will be complicated. Yeah, Ken.
Jill, number one, you know, I guess there are a number of issues here. There's clearly identifying those residences that are not served is important. But number two, we have, first of all, Spectrum's network is all coaxial cable, to my knowledge, and that's not going to cut it. You know, in the future, for our homes to be competitive, we're going to have a full fiber optic network. And to my knowledge, I don't believe that exists to most residences in Kent. It's all coaxial cable.
And it's the same in Sharon. So Comcast is doing coaxial cable. We did not do fiber.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think that's a big issue. And the other is, you know, you can go to the FCC site and it will tell you what your upload and download speed is. But if you run the test in your own home, it could be a percentage of that.
Mm-hmm.
So just relying on those numbers, which are currently on file by the FCC, it doesn't give you an accurate assessment of which homes are underserved.
I agree with you. And that is why there is this whole challenge process that will be very hard to do, because in order to challenge, you need residents in their homes to run an Ookla speed test 3 different times, capture the speed, and send that in some kind of usable file to DEEP as part of a formal challenge process. And that is going to be hard to do.
And are you planning on doing that in Sharon, or?
Well, so we did, because we had some information that a year ago, the state, this guy named David Lucan at the Office of OPM, I forget what that's called, Office of
Policy
Project Management, Policy Management. Yeah. Okay. So he was hired, he's a cartographer, and he was hired to do maps of broadband access in Connecticut. And we fed him a lot of the data that we had from individual people like myself who did it at home, did our own Ookla speed tests. And then Comcast gave him a lot of the data because it was okay for them to give him the data because they knew they were going to be serving these homes that they didn't have the service for. So the state maps for Sharon are pretty accurate. And I've done a cursory review of the federal maps for Sharon, and I think there are some inaccuracies, but I'm going to have to challenge. I haven't yet gone through the process. That's like, I've got to do it because I think the challenge process opens in April and it doesn't last very long.
30 days.
Yeah. So that's the hard part. And it's so hard that I think they're going to have to throw that out and not make that contingent, not penalize towns who can't do it and not give them any money. But that's right now what the rule is that you have to challenge those numbers. And you have, and in that way, you would have to do it each individual. You'd have to know which homes are you believe are or underserved, and get in touch with those people and convince them to do these speed tests and send you that data. I think it's really just capturing the screen of the actual speed test when it's done.
Where did you get the resources? This is a pretty intensive process just to take the maps and understand what you have. Was that strictly a volunteer? That's where all the resources were volunteers who just gave the time and commitment to do that, or did you have to contract a third party to do that on your behalf?
These are all volunteers. We all did it volunteer. We did have town funding for doing the engineering. When we did the RFP, the initial RFP, we had $30,000 that we could pay anybody who won the RFP to do the engineering for an all fiber project. And so that was $30,000. And then we have some money from the town, a few $1,000s for a couple of mailers to maintain a website. But we haven't hired anyone, a contractor to do it. Actually, I think that's an excellent idea, Ken, to hire a contractor, for you guys to hire. There may be people out there now who are willing to challenge these maps, know how to do it, and maybe you could get some sort of special allocation from the town. It has to happen now, so it couldn't wait for the next fiscal year budget cycle.
But this is Eric. Just that the challenge period opens in April 1st. Is that correct?
It may be open now.
Okay.
But let me.
I don't think so. I've been checking, and
Okay.
they said it could start in mid-March.
Okay.
And they will be releasing the guide to go and the portal to be able to do the challenges all at the same time.
How long will this period be, Lynn, if you know?
30 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
30 days.
It's really not a lot of time.
And if we're not able to make that time frame, what do we do? I mean, is there going to be a follow-on a year from now, or?
I don't, not the way the Deep has been presenting it. It's like this, or you lose your opportunity to get the money.
Right. But I think they're going to run into a big train wreck with this, but that is how they're presenting it. That you either you successfully challenge the maps so that you have an accurate picture of what addresses are or underserved, and then you will qualify for federal funding. But if the map says those addresses are served, then you won't qualify. Yeah, Sarah.
So if we if we can, let's just say a street in Kent, let's just say Halls Lane. Let's just say Halls Lane, we know there's very bad internet on Halls Lane. Some of those houses might be using satellite, whatever. Is there a way to sort of piece it out in the sense of if we know that one house on Halls Lane doesn't have it, we can just kind of assume that every single house on Halls Lane doesn't have it. So we're not literally, I mean, what I'm concerned about is this idea that this little committee is going to be going door to door, going to be contacting the 1,400 households we have in Kent individually and saying, can I come to your home and run a speed test? I mean, we don't have time for that. We'll never make it.
Right, right. So Lynn there is an answer on this. I just don't know it. But I think if you have 3 houses in a census block,
that's kind of what
that you can prove do not have, the requisite speed, then they will consider that whole block or underserved. I may not have the specifics of that right, but Lynn can get you the actual rule on that, because they went through that in the last webinar, Lynn.
They did, but I didn't understand what a census block is out in rural Connecticut.
Yeah, do we have that demarcation on is it the FCC site shows the census blocks?
Yes, yes. There's census blocks and there's census tracts, TRACTS, and I can't remember which one is smaller. But you can do it by that smallest increment. And I think if you get 3 within it, they will assume that whole area is or underserved.
That makes a difference.
So we would have to locate households that are running some sort of broadband internet to even test, right? So if we just go and test someone who's running some DSL from their house just because they elected to run DSL, it's not really a good argument, correct? We'd want to locate people running broadband and show that it's not fast enough.
I think if you have houses where they simply aren't connected, like they're just not, there is no service provider to that house, that would qualify. How you find this, if you know people who are kind of living off of the internet. Yeah. And then if you know the house only has Frontier DSL, then I think you can assume that I think there is an assumption that won't meet the speed test. People know enough to know that. So then it's like, depends on what the what they're using. So it's generally like satellite, a Wi-Fi hotspot from, AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile, or their cable, the cable connection. So, so you would need some connectivity to run it, but we've had, there are speed tests here on River Road that are, I just saw one 9 download and 0.25 upload.
I just ran one at my house. I'm the last house on Fuller Mountain, and it was 166 download. So
you would be considered served, I believe.
Yep. So I think the trick here is to find the ones that don't have anything other than DSL, or don't have anything, correct? That would be the first start.
Right. But I would go back to what Ken was saying before about, well, I guess one big thing is your project dependent on getting federal dollars? Or do you want a fiber network for all of Kent for all of the reasons that Ken talked about before, that, and that if you could get the town to pay for that, then that might be one way you'd want to go. I think you would want to explore, could we possibly qualify for any of this federal dollars? But even if you find that this is really cumbersome and way too much to do right now, doesn't mean the project is over. It does mean that maybe the town funds it.
Did you guys look at maybe just doing fiber in the center of your town to promote economic development within the center? I could see Kent looking to, connect our private schools and our, commercial center to fiber and possibly relying on coaxial in the more rural areas?
Yeah. We didn't, we were going for universal access. And we don't have the same kind of town center that you do.
Yep.
But I think that that's not a bad option. I would say with the private schools, they probably are already connected by fiber. There is something called the Connecticut Education Network. And if your town hall isn't connected, it should be. There's now money to.
It's happening.
Libraries, right? Sarah?
The library is on that, and I actually just talked to town hall yesterday, and that is in the works.
Yes, so that should definitely happen. So right now, Sen isn't set up to do town centers, but I think that they are looking at that for the future. And that is an all fiber. It's a terrific network, by the way. Yeah. So whether there was a way you could extend from that network for, commercial for the center of town, that might be a conversation to have with the people who run the Sen network.
And then compounding kind of the complexity here. I know that some of my clients, when I go into their homes, have paid for, an elevated service through their cable provider for even faster internet.
Mm-hmm.
Does that factor into this analysis? I've had people run multiple, lines into their house so that they can stream more and have different people on different. I mean, does that qualify as broad, like a certain accessibility to broadband?
Yes, that would. So they are probably served, and there probably wouldn't be federal dollars that would go to get them better access.
Yeah.
Unless they lived in like that census tract where everybody around them, is trying to get by on HughesNet satellite, then I think they might, there might be federal dollars for connecting them as well. And I would say, both these federal grants want fiber, not coaxial cable, but they're realizing that a lot of our towns are built out quite widely with coax now. And they kind of had to accept it, sort of holding their nose.
Is there, on that cost issue, like what if I'm right on Route 7 and I did the test and I don't get the upload numbers, the required upload numbers? So what if I say, oh, I don't get the upload numbers, and then Spectrum says, oh, but you have to pay more for that?
Right.
Is that
a really good question to ask Deep?
I did ask them that, and they didn't
what
respond
did
to me.
They didn't answer you? Well,
No.
I would keep asking, and I would talk to our representatives in the state legislature if you're not getting answers for Deep about that.
Okay.
I have been contacting them because one of the things about this isn't pertains to you, but it pertains to me, is that the Connected Communities grant doesn't want to give any money to projects that have already started before the award date, which is June 14th of 2023. So it might mean that Sharon, if they go by those rules, Sharon won't get any money because we will be done by then.
Right.
But we didn't start until after the ARPA money, until after all of this began. It just that this took the state 2 years to come up with the rules. So,
I know the upload is always a fraction of the download in every speed test I do. So I do speed tests now, like in every house I list.
Yeah.
Because the first question I get is, can I get online and show them a speed test? And it's always, the upload's always like 10 compared to, 50 to 100.
But so the minimum is 20. The minimum is 20.
If the upload is below 20, then you're considered underserved, even if you have download of over 100. So the upload speed, there needs to unserved upload of 3, and underserved is upload. I don't know. Is it 20 or 25?
It is 20.
20. Okay.
Notwithstanding the unbelievable level of effort, it seems like we're really at an extreme disadvantage until we have an inventory of every one of the homes in the community and have documented what their upload and download speeds are. Because once you do that, then you know exactly what you have and what to ask for.
But even Sharon spent like 18 months trying to get that, and we always had very imperfect numbers. We made a really good effort, and it is exactly what you want, Ken, but we didn't go about it the right way. So I think maybe people have learned how to do this, and maybe there is some kind of contractor who could figure out how to do that.
Well, Jill, I know you said you had to leave to make your other meeting, but that segues really well into why I asked Richard Welsh to be here, because he's got a way of doing it automatically. So I asked him if he could talk to us about that. Okay. So if we need to say goodbye to you, Jill.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
Feel free to.
Good work and Sharon.
Yeah.
Great job.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. So Rich, tell us about what you had talked to Ken and I about in the summertime about the idea of hosting a survey where somebody could there could be a speed test done automatically for them.
That's it, simply enough. I thought if we hosted the survey ourselves and didn't use a third party, we could incorporate in some statistical analysis of their connection while they're filling out their survey. Maybe there'll be a button at the end, click here to submit and check your speed, and it'll do it all. Bang. We could generate screenshots if you want, or they'll look like screenshots. No one will know the difference, but I'll generate them electronically.
That's what the state is saying they need.
Get 3 of them. To get somebody to log in 3 times, though, is going to be tough.
Yeah.
And it's an awful lot of code to write.
Could you have 3 buttons at the bottom?
I could, but the time will be too close together. I could do it on one
They
button.
need to be separated by certain periods of time.
It just says different times. It does. I think they still haven't released the guide. So but they did make it sound like you needed to have it at different times and different days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's impossible.
That makes it very difficult. I would hate to write all that and have one person do it, log in twice. We still didn't get the one person's complete data. That's what I think would happen.
Yeah.
Or you just
how many people are we talking about, really? I'd like to start quantifying things. I'd like to know how much money we're talking about. I'd like to know how many houses we're talking about. And if we can't answer these questions, I think this is the stuff we should be trying to track down. I have an end run around doing the surveys and like randomly gathering data. We could collect utility pole data. This is where we started originally. We just do like our own survey of all the utility poles, collect all that data with just photographs, and we could then weed through that and figure out an awful lot. We could deduce an awful lot of information. We could tell you right away which houses are available to be wired and which houses aren't wired, which houses are not available to be wired, and so forth and so on. No one could lie to us if we have that data.
Yeah, to me, that was really an attractive way to go about this, because number one, we could ask people to take their cell phone and walk outside of their house or walk up and down their street and just take photographs of the poles on their street, and then send them to a website, and then there would be a lot of people that wouldn't do it, or there might be a lot of poles that aren't in people's, in front of people's homes or up and down, streets. And so in that particular situation, maybe we could engage the Boy Scouts or different community groups around here to have to go out as a group and to photograph those, those poles. And, we could, according to Rich, we could develop a pretty extensive inventory by doing that.
You could also use like a mapping software like Avenza, and actually on a map locate.
I already wrote it. Steve, I already wrote it. But I
Yeah.
use Google Maps instead.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
you upload the photo, I extract the data, I extract the GPS coordinates, plot it on a map, and move on. I need 3 photos of one pole to give you an exact location because I'm triangulating it. I know how big the poles are, but I can be very precise.
Okay.
And then from there, we do
So
a
what 3 photos? You need the number off of them. You need the
no,
what's hanging.
nope. Just take 3 pictures of a pole. I don't think it. I don't think you could hold the camera still enough unless it was on a tripod and you were doing very quick shots. But I think if you were on your cell phone and you took 3 pictures of a pole, that would be enough for me to triangulate its position. I need the offset
Yeah. And but
of the
do you
GPS
do you
because
want
otherwise
the
I know where the picture was taken from.
but would you I mean just for organization, would you want the numbers off the pole just for does it matter?
I think I
You
can
know,
deduce that from the map after the fact,
They all
but
just have their own they all have their own little numbers, I know.
I don't know. There's a database of those though. So the
Each
more
pole has a
data I can
number.
get, the better. The more data I get, the better. But I think that's a lot to ask people.
Well, you could just you could have a you could have a volunteer who does one road, you know, one person does Fuller Mountain, one person does Skiff Mountain, one person does, you know.
Yeah, it's doable. It's doable.
And you'll be able to tell what's on there just from looking at it.
No, that's the next piece of software we're going to have to write. We're
Okay.
going to have to write some kind of some routine to just pull out the components that are on there and we inventory the components because there's transformers and there's relays and switches and various things. And by knowing what those are, we can easily pick them out of the photos.
It seems like an awful lot of work.
It is. It's a
Um,
terrible amount of work. But
yeah, I mean,
we're talking a $12 million, $15 million build out. I figured it's worth it. And of the other alternative is to have a survey done and a survey company come in, engineers and surveyors. We're talking 1.5, $1.6 million for that. So I thought this would be a worthwhile effort. But if our goal is to only serve a couple of underserved houses, then none of this is worthwhile.
but it's not going to be a couple. I
Well, like I
mean,
said, I
I
need to
really,
quantify things. I just don't know.
I mean, if I truly am underserved because I don't have the upload speeds, I mean, the majority of our houses, I know this from my campaign, the majority of our houses are along Route 7. And if Route 7 is not served, if the majority of people on Route 7 are not served, then that's a lot of people out of
The
our
FCC thinks
1,400.
everybody on Route 7 has a 1,000 megabits down and 35 up, uniform throughout the entire town of Kent.
But that's not what I'm seeing on a speed test.
That's probably what the provider can provide to you if you're willing to pay for it.
That's the part I was asking Jill about at the end there, because I don't understand if you're going to do, if they don't, it's like if you do a speed test and you do 3 speed tests and this is what you find, you know, are they going to say to them, say to a customer, oh, no, you're not paying for the highest amount? There's
I mean, I
been
just
no reference to the fees that we pay to internet service providers in all of the webinars that I've been on. There's been no reference to that at all.
I mean, I just Googled Spectrum Business that you for $50 a month when bundled with some like a phone line,
Yeah, a landline.
20 another $20 a month. You can get 300 megabytes per second download. So, I mean, it sounds like it's there. It's just more expensive.
I know that
It's
question
about what I
has to
get
be
now.
answered.
Are you on a business line?
Nope. No, they wouldn't give me a business line
Really?
initially. Yeah.
Well,
Part of me is also, you know, I've had houses that, you know, could not get anything and they've now gone to Starlink. And it's part of me is wondering if we're going to see a shift away from this and see more
It's
satellite.
just not fast enough.
Yeah.
satellite.
The future is going to bring more and more applications that require more and more data, and wireless is kind of capped. The spectrum is only so wide.
And coaxial
Fiber
cable.
lines
Yeah.
are The difference is astronomical. It's a couple orders of magnitude difference we're talking about. So having a fiber infrastructure for the town would be extremely beneficial for years to come. Valuable as well. I think if we had our own network, we could lease it to the providers. We could charge them to sell their services to the town.
I vaguely remember, I'm making this number up, but when the CEN came into the library, we got a grant and it was running from Kent School, because they're one of the hubs in the area, and it cost $30,000 to run fiber optic from Kent School to the library. So what is that, 3.5 blocks? Something like that?
And so that fiber's there. Could other businesses along the way tap into that?
No, so you can't. CEN doesn't allow that. It's just right now for libraries, municipalities, schools, things like that. I think, as she said, in the future, that is part of their goal, and they're actually a pretty fabulous organization. They're a nonprofit. They haven't raised their rates in a bazillion years. Like, they're really something special. But it's also not cheap. We pay $3,000 a year.
That's not
Rick,
bad.
didn't you say that fiber's being run in town right now?
Rick, you're on mute.
Yeah, Frontier has been stringing it. They don't have anything connected yet, but they weren't doing every area either, because depending on whether the way the circuits are run, what they're going to do.
So Frontier's been starting the process of running.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Frontier, it's called bypassing. What Frontier has been doing nationwide is they have been running fiber optic cable up and down streets across the United States. And what their long-term objective, and they call it bypassing. So they may run us, there may be no customers in a whole neighborhood or a whole street, and they'll run fiber optic cable down that street. And once they get a certain coverage, then they will turn around and offer the homes or the residences or businesses on that street an option to what their current provider is. And in most cases, the current provider is not going to be able to compete with A, the rate, and number two, definitely not the bandwidth that they're going to get.
Do we have a
had some
map of that?
competition.
Do we know where Frontier is laying their fiber?
They showed us a map when they came to town to talk about it. I'll have to look around, see if I can find one. But
Okay.
like Kent Hollow, that's got the Washington Exchange, so the Kent fiber wasn't going to cover that. That would have to be covered by whatever they ran in Washington. And the same with some of the houses up like towards Warren that would have the 868 numbers. That would be a different network. And then part of Kent Hollow is New Milford Exchange. So it wasn't going to get everybody. It was mainly the two main roads and then whatever's off of those.
And it was connected to their phone numbers? Like their landline phone numbers? Is that what?
Well, basically for Frontier, and then whatever they can pick up once they get it put in. If they're gonna have a better service and cheaper than Charter or Spectrum, then everybody's gonna jump ship. But
right,
until it's hooked up, you don't know. I know my cable bills getting out of well, I want to pay every month, but I'm supposed to have 300 speed, and I checked mine, and it was like 9 downloads. So, but my router's really old, so they'll probably blame that. So,
Such a complicated issue, really.
yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully we can get some kind of response from Deep on that question about the cost, because that's a biggie. Like,
Do we know just offhand, not even very accurately, what? I mean, like Sharon, I there were certain roads I know just from selling real estate, there was like no internet. It was a big issue for houses on it. But in Kent, I don't know of as many areas. Like Sharon has a lot of these dirt roads. But Kent, I don't feel like we have as many of these little spots.
Where
Rick,
is the map?
but
Like,
there,
where does that FCC map, where does it exist?
um,
Is that something you could email everybody? And
yeah.
I love a good map.
I had included it in
I
some
just
stuff, but
Googled it, came right up,
yeah.
Right.
Um,
popped in Kent.
and there's also the state has done the maps, and as you heard, the state's maps are actually more accurate than the FCC maps, and they've been trying to work with the FCC and try and, especially like she was saying, Sharon has been able to get changes, but they're still trying to work with the state to say, okay, can you help us get the FCC to realize that their maps are incorrect? And that's been an ongoing process.
I've got to step away. I'll be right back.
Okay. So there, Steve, on last week's meeting, Jonathan Edelman is on our group, and he is on Chippewa Road, and he is one of those people, and he says there's other people in that area that don't have any wired access. They're
Yeah.
using Starlink, and they're using other things too. He's so those are
That's the only place I know
yeah.
in Kent.
But this underserved thing, that is a whole different, not being served at all is different than not meeting the minimum. So
Seems like it gets really into a gray area though.
I know.
It's like, is your router old? Do you not pay for a business line? Are you standing 20 feet away from your router when you're doing your speed test behind the masonry chimney in your house?
I know.
Are you standing right on the
Yeah,
router?
you're right. A lot of
You
factors.
know, are you on DSL? Are you on cable? Are you on Starlink?
I think that should be the
But
differentiator.
it has to be wired. So I don't I've heard them say in these webinars that satellite is not, they're not counting satellite.
I know, but I've gone into houses where I'm like, why do you have satellite? And they're like, oh, we like it for the TV. And I'm like, it's more expensive and your internet sucks. And they can get cable, but they just like it for direct TV. And I'm like, so, I've gone into houses where people are running DSL. I'm like, why are you running DSL? I don't know. Just running DSL because they bundled me.
Mm.
And I'm like, well, that's why your internet's really slow in this house. And oh, I never thought about that. So we can do all this analysis, but I think and to get an apples to apples approach is going to be difficult and have something concrete. And you can see it from the Sharon people. They're like, we did a lot of work, but it's not, it's kind of fuzzy math.
Back to the polls.
I think we need to start. The polls is just so much work. I cannot imagine people stepping up to do that with us, Rich. I understand what you're saying, but I think if we can do a simple survey and ask them, maybe our first survey, we just asked for them to upload a screenshot of their, give them the link of how to do a screenshot of their upload download speeds, and then they can upload it to a Google form, and then we at least will have one, and we can ask them, do you have, what is your internet provider? Hopefully people will know that.
It sounds to me like at minimum, there's no downside and there's a lot of upside in letting the town host all of this data, because we'll begin collecting a lot of data. And once we start collecting it, if we're hosting it, we can manipulate it. We can do whatever we want to. We can ensure that we get the right information to give to other folks that we need. So it seems like that's a no-brainer to say, let's host all of this. And instead of somebody going on to Google, they go on to the town. Am I right, Rich? We can give them a site, uh, on the town's host, and they do the upload and download right there, and it automatically gets recorded.
Yeah, I would just give them a button. Yeah, I wouldn't make them upload anything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, and then all of a sudden then all the nice thing about that is we begin collecting all the information in one place, and we begin collecting it in a manner that we can slice it and dice it or use it in any way we want, and we can add things onto it. And how much is what is the cost of hosting this? I think we've already figured that out, and
Yeah, it wasn't very expensive, and I even bumped it up a little bit to just cover any
Yeah,
future
and
concerns.
the selectmen did approve spending $800 through June 30th. So we do have a little bit of money.
We don't need it yet, though. We don't know what we're doing yet.
The thing is that it would be nice to have the data from people about who is their internet service provider, and try and get them to understand what type of internet they have. Because then we can start building, you know, we can know, are there 200 people, or are there, you know, 10 that don't have any service at all? I mean, I think the underserved thing is definitely going to be more challenging to figure out.
right.
But to find out people who have no service or who are choosing not to have service, that's one thing Jill didn't really talk about. But when you look at their survey, you see there are people who are choosing not to have internet, and that, you know, that's fine. They don't want to have internet. But we need to know who those people are, so we have their accurate numbers.
Well, one is to figure out how we're going to go and reach out to them and get them to give us the information. But the fundamental is we've got to decide where is the common place that we're going to warehouse all that information. And so I think that's step number one, that we make a decision, or to host all that information at town hall. And then we have to figure out the different parts of how the outreach is going to go. Because once you decide to host it at town hall, not only can they record the upload and download speeds, but you can do a survey on there, and that's where they put the information, or that's where we enter the information.
So, Rich, when we talked this week, you said you were a little concerned about the time involved with the coding. Would it be possible to like embed a Google form into?
You can use a Google form, but the speed test trickery goes out the window.
Oh, okay. Even if you had like the Google form in the top, and then you had your button at the bottom.
Yeah, no, I have to use all Google all the way through there. They're not going to let me call out a secondary script to start doing weird stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, no way. I could do damage with that, you know.
All right.
Where does this go? Where does this relate to this grant timing process that was mentioned earlier, that started now and apparently will close at the end of April? Are we still trying to get into that time frame, or not?
Yeah, because we need to know who has internet and who has wired internet and who doesn't. So that's the very first step of trying to figure out who is going to qualify for this funding.
And then we need to get an agreement, or we need to get something with the provider who's going to put the money up.
No, this is federal money that if we can win a challenge process, Eric, then my understanding is then that person and through the town will get that property address through the town will get money.
Okay.
But you have to go through it's going through a series of steps in order to successfully get the money.
Okay.
Well, that is actually who does get the money? Who gets the money? Where does it go?
I don't know all the details of that because it hasn't been explained to us. But my
So like I understand that there's
understanding
a
is
pile of federal money out there, but is it going to the town so then the town would pay Frontier, Charter, CEM, somebody who's going to lay the lines? Is that how that works?
I really don't know because they have not explained that. But the thing is that an individual cannot, at this point in the process, an individual property owner cannot apply. They can only go through the town. So, but there's different categories of, you know, an internet service provider is one of these players in the process too. So I don't, and that's why I'm hoping the guide, once they release it, will be, you know, they'll have it in writing and we'll be able to understand more of the details. So I have no problem with you know, going through and having Rich write the code and as long as we can get it done, you know, basically within the month, because we need to get the survey out quickly so then we can try and get we can fill in because we're not going to get 100%, and we need to have hard copy survey forms because we need to have people that are dealing with social services and Kent Center School and the library who don't have internet or not tuned into email, because we have to do our best to try and reach as many people as possible.
Rich, is this something that you're willing to undertake, or are we asking too much?
No, I'm happy to do whatever necessary to solve the problems. But I don't know if this is the right solution, truth be told. Um, yeah, I think we really only need to identify who the DSL only houses are. If we could figure out which houses only get DSL, then we know the underserved people. If they can get cable, it's a matter of their option or their package or whatnot. I don't think that's going to qualify for funding. But if they're only DSL, it means they only have the old-fashioned copper wire on their block. Then they're underserved. So if we could just figure out who they are, then we could talk to them and then run speed tests. The whole game changes then if we find out which blocks these are or which streets these are. Am I wrong? Because that's a 10 and 1. That's, 10 download, 1 upload. That's totally underserved by anybody's standards. So if they can only get DSL, they qualify. So if we could just figure out which blocks are only DSL, we have all our answers we need. Then we can do speed tests. Does that make sense?
Then the speed tests are more targeted versus everybody sending us
blanketing it. Yeah.
And
I mean, go ahead, Ken.
No, I was going to ask Rick. Rick, you probably have the best feel for where the roads are that are totally unserved. Is that something that you have a pretty good feel for, that you could identify those roads?
Yeah, I don't think there's any roads that are totally unserved. There's portions of them, like say Dugan Road, because the few houses that were up top didn't want to pay to have the line run up there. So, but then I forget what year it was. It was 1988 or something like that. There was a law that said that anything that already had wire going to it by a certain date, cable had to run cable there. So if you go up North Kent Road down to the river, there's cable line going down there, but there's no houses. So it was a waste of a lot of equipment back then. But I think most of them in town, except for like Chippewa, which, I mean, they could get cable there. They ran new telephone a couple of years ago, but they didn't coordinate with the cable company, obviously, at the same time. But it's just a matter of the cost of doing it, because the cable company or Spectrum, I don't think is going to run a couple miles of cable to pick up 2 or 3 customers.
Hmm.
They're, you know,
But that's what this funding is
That's
all
exactly what
about.
this is for. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's where
Yeah.
we're going with this.
going to be very few spots that it's not actually, well,
So, I mean, it sounds like the end of Dugan Road, Chippewa Road, Mountain
probably
Road, is
Schaghticoke is
Mountain Road,
across the river. I don't, or
is
maybe
Mountain Road
check that.
all the way to the top?
I don't know about all the way to the top because it's a private road, but you got that and some nerd. I'm sure that, you know, are we looking
All of
for
St.
ones
John's
that,
Peak subdivision has it.
yeah, they added it to the St. John's subdivision, you know, before they really started the build up there. But
I personally can't think of many places that don't have cable in Kent. Like when I worked in Cornwall and Sharon, yeah, I mean there were big areas where it just you couldn't get anything. So in Kent, I'm not so sure we have the same issues.
Right.
That's what I've always thought until I, started talking to other people and I was like, oh, okay.
Well, if we follow up on Rich's idea, how do we identify the locations that have DSL service?
Is Rick, is that something that DSL is through Frontier, right? Can they give us a map of the areas they serve with DSL?
I'm sure they tell you, well, if you look on the federal thing, the Verizon says they do 90%, 99% of Kent zip code. So
is
I
Verizon
don't
doing
think they're gonna
DSL?
say that they're gonna give you every customer's name, but
No, they won't do that.
Frontier owned by Verizon or something like that.
Yeah.
well, Verizon with Spectrum was 99%. Usenet is 90. They're all like 99%. Viasat, T-Mobile is 96%.
Well, once they open up this portal for the state of Connecticut deep, that you can actually zero in on the roads and you can see, what is the service they're getting. You can't see the addresses, but you can sort of figure it out by the roads. But DSL doesn't, you're right, Rich. I mean, that is a key to trying to figure out whether or not they're served or not, because DSL is just not going to cut it. So
You even take a picture of the poles if they got both telephone and cable on the pole and both of them are tapped off and going to a house. How do you know which one? You still don't know which one's which that they're using.
But it doesn't matter. They have the option. That would be served.
Yeah.
But if they only had DSL there, then they would be underserved. So, or nothing at all.
That'd be pretty easy to figure out, except, might get shot at going on some of the private roads around here.
I don't think we'd have to go to the private roads. I think we could see from the utility pole that led to that private road. There's right. There's nothing going to be on.
Even if they started out with cable, if they went the whole length of the road or not, they're only up to.
But again, I wouldn't care as long as they have the ability to run it, to use it. They're served.
Well, but part of the issue is that they're not necessarily served. If the cable's running up the road, but if the house is far off the road and they don't want to run it from the road to the house,
I think that's an edge case. We're not going to
underserved.
see too many of those.
I
How
think
many
you'd be
people do you think
surprised.
wired half a driveway?
No,
No,
not
my
that
point
they
is
would.
that they wouldn't wire the driveway at all. They would just wire the street, and then they'd say, if you want it at your house, you have to pay to run it up your driveway.
That's what
And I've
happened.
heard that complaint from people in Kent before, where they were told it's available, but you have to pay to get it to your house.
The big issue is when you have conduit in place that was laid and it was put in at a time when it was just phone lines. So you have a conduit just for phone lines. Cable guys will say, we can't use that conduit. So you have to put in a whole new one. So the cost to get it from the road to your house now, I've seen estimates of like $60,000 to $80,000 to get.
Wow.
Oh yeah, for these houses that have these long driveways.
Oh, okay.
And I've told them, like, and the cable guys won't touch the telephone guys stuff. I'm like, why don't you just hook your line up to the old telephone line and pull a new, just
Right.
cannibalize the conduit. So I've had electricians come in and do this work because the companies won't touch each other's stuff. And then the electricians come in and they do it for much cheaper um, to upgrade services. But I mean, I've had clients put in $80,000 just to get internet. I'm listing a property in Sharon soon, and I'm sure it was served, but it's got like a quarter-mile long driveway, and they had to put. Luckily, they had poles still, so they were able to put up wire from Route 4 up to their house, but it wasn't cheap.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try to get more clarity on this from Deep, because the money issues is very confusing to me. So
if Rich is going to write this survey with the code for us, what are the rest of us to be doing in the meantime?
well, I took Sharon's survey questions and copied and pasted them into a Google Doc, and I can send that out to you guys, and you can see if are there other questions that we want to include. And that, I think that's the first step. And then we have at least have the text part of it ready to go. And then
Would this be sent out like on there are certain things that the selectmen send out, those yellow
yeah, we do
would
it
be
through
sent out as one of those?
we do it, like I said, we definitely want to make use of the First Selectmen's newsletter
Absolutely.
email list, because
Yes.
that reaches at least 1,400 people. But we also need to have some hard copies
We need, and we should
available.
have them here. I mean, we're a place, and maybe at the school, and maybe with Samantha, that when
Right.
people come in, we can have a big area, big sign or something that says, "Do you have internet at your house?" And please take this survey,
Right.
just to give us a sense. We especially want the people that the answer will be no.
Exactly. So I think that's something
But I
we
think the
can
first
definitely be
question,
working
if we
on.
go back to what Rich is saying, the first question is your only option for internet DSL? Because we need to locate those people first and foremost.
But
Correct?
honestly, Steve, and I don't think I'm too dumb, but I don't know what kind of internet I have. I have Charter Spectrum. What is that? I don't know.
Cable.
It's
Is
cable.
it?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
coaxial.
Yeah,
Now
so
you know, sir.
I think we need to have some kind of a like explanation,
Yeah,
little
like I mean,
explanation box
right.
of like,
I
if
know when
you
I go
have,
home and I say, "Oh, I want my Wi-Fi to work," it works. I don't ask any questions.
Then it's not DSL.
It doesn't go. Yeah.
Not in a long time.
You know if you have DSL. You know it.
Okay. No, please. I had an adolescent boy in the house for like 2 years. He would have told me.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
No, it impacts everything. You can't stream things.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
can't do much other than maybe, I mean, it's like, it takes a while for a web page to download. Photos take a while to download.
Nobody on this call is on DSL.
because you can't even run Zoom, right?
Nope.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
They'd be
Writing the
freezing up
minutes.
constantly.
So for the person that's writing the minutes, what decisions have we made?
Well, I think maybe we should make a motion that we go with a hosted survey. We still need to find out from,
I think the initial amount of data we're going to get is not enough to justify putting up a server and doing all that work for a one round of we can have our own database still and not go through all of that, all those hoops.
okay, well, maybe the thing to do is to do a Google survey, and then we reach out to the people who answer saying, yes, I have DSL.
That's a much better use of our time
And
initially.
then we can, go one-on-one with these folks and then help them through this process.
Well, and generally, if they have it, their neighbors have it too. Isn't that what we're thinking? That it's going to be
We'll find them in
clumped?
packs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to do a survey, and where are we going to warehouse the data?
We're going to use Google, and we'll have a spreadsheet, and then we'll be able to analyze the spreadsheet and figure out where these people live, and
Okay.
And then get it. Problem is, it can't be. If I hope people who don't have that have DSL will be not wanting to have an anonymous, because if they're not willing to give us the information, it's going to be really hard to track them down.
Right.
So I guess our next step will be to approve the survey.
Right.
Will the Google survey give us their IP address so the person that's filling it out?
I don't think it does.
I've never tried to. It'll capture their email, but I don't know if it captures IP.
You just put at the top of the survey, free money, free money, free money.
Faster internet.
Yeah, right? I
Right.
mean, it's in their best interest to do it.
Right. So.
Okay, so
Maybe-
Lynn, are you going to do a first draft of the survey and then
Yeah.
circulate it, and then we'll all comment?
Yep.
Okay.
So do you want to meet in another week, or do you want 2 weeks? What do you guys want to do? I'm just cognizant of this deadline.
I think it's coming. I think it's looming. So probably next week makes sense.
Yeah, I think until we get to the deadline, we ought to meet weekly.
Okay.
And
So
measure our progress. And
right. So it seems like Wednesdays at 4:00 is a good time, since the last 2 weeks we've been. So let's try for that again.
okay.
And if that is not working for somebody else, hopefully they will speak up.
And by the way, I think it's a good sign. We've been on the phone for an hour and a half. That's about the right size.
Yeah.
We're an hour and a half, and we shouldn't have meetings that last any longer than that.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
And if we don't get everything done in that period, we have to cut it off, and we'll just follow it up a week later.
Right. Okay. So everybody's in agreement. We're going to use a Google survey, and then we will, that'll definitely help us get things out quickly too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I'm in favor.
yeah. All right, good. All right, good. And then we'll meet again next Wednesday at 4:00. I think that's about it. And I'll get a draft out to you guys as soon as I can put it into Google Forms.
Rich, are you going to be able to stay with us?
Absolutely.
Okay, because your input is invaluable.
Wow.
And
thanks, Ken.
well, and also this is not going to be like the last committee. We're going to get shit done. So
I've already written half the code.
We don't put
code.
that in the survey.
That's in the minutes. Put it in the minutes.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, you're writing the minutes, Ken. You can.
I'd like to make a motion
Oh
that
my
we're going to
gosh,
get shit.
this is
Can I
all
make a
being
motion that we'll
recorded.
get shit done?
All right. So let's say we're adjourning at 5:26 p.m. tonight. So thank you guys.
Thank
and
you,
I'll see
everybody.
next week.
Okay. Have a nice
Okay.
evening, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.